this is Paul Kelway, the Wildlife Preparedness and Response Manager at Oil Spill Response, and welcome to the 6th episode in a series of interviews I've been doing with the network of leading wildlife response organisations that have been participating in the multi-year Global Oiled Wildlife Response System, or GOWRS project. In 2022, GOWRS will be transitioning to become a Global Oiled Wildlife Response Service, a guaranteed 4-person wildlife assessment team, which will become part of OSRL's guaranteed services to our members. To raise awareness of the incredible organisations who will be collectively delivering that service, I'm hosting these regular conversations with each of the 10 GOWRS partners. Today I'm joined by Nicky Stander, who is the Head of Conservation at the South African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds, or SANCCOB. Nicky's based in Cape Town, South Africa, and has spent the last 12 years overseeing the rescue, rehabilitation and release of seabirds at SANCCOB, with an increased focus on endangered species such as the African penguin. During that time, Nicky has responded to several oil spill incidents along the African coastline. She has a BSc in animal science and has co-authored several publications, including on the topic of egg incubation and hand rearing of African penguin chicks. I wanted to really just start with asking if you could briefly introduce SANCCOB.
Thanks, Paul. So SANCCOB is quite an old organisation. We were established in 1968. We're a marine conservation organisation with a special focus on endangered seabirds, including the African penguin. Sadly, species of seabird all over the world are declining, and so our job is becoming a lot harder. Our work is primarily in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape of South Africa, and we've recently been moving into Namibia, trying to assist them with some preparedness work as well.
Is there a story from all those years of rescuing and rehabilitating wildlife that particularly stands out as one that really illustrates the value of the work that SANCCOB does?
Yeah, so there's many stories that I could think of that SANCCOB has been involved in over the last 50 plus years, and in terms of oiled wildlife response, you know, we've responded to every spill along the South African coastline affecting seabirds since our establishment in 1968. And of course, one of the most remembered and celebrated responses was the Treasure in 2000, more than 20 years ago. It remains the largest animal rescue in history. So, you know, huge recognition for not only for SANCCOB, but for other organizations that assisted, and all of the volunteers, thousands of people that helped us. And of course, you know, with that comes an expectation. And so we are remembered specifically for that event. Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly a real sort of milestone or sort of significant incident, as you say, in terms of the numbers and the role that SANCCOB played and obviously continues to play, you know, with the African penguin and other species in South Africa. Looking at almost to sort of the more recent time, there's sort of other similar events that you've had to deal with, or other challenges that you're sort of relating to in terms of seabird emergencies in South Africa?
SANCCOB has had to adapt over the years. 20 years ago, oil spills were much more frequent, and that was the core function of our organization. But these days we have way more challenges with climate change issues and disease, you know. So if I just look back to last year in 2021, we dealt with 3 major responses, and they were all dealt with in the same manner as what you would with an oil spill response. And we started off the year with a very serious Cape cormorant response, where the chicks were abandoned by their parents. There was more than 2,000 chicks that were rescued from Robben Island and brought to our facility. And that response lasted for 6 months. And then off the back of that, we went straight into an avian influenza outbreak, a very serious disease that causes huge mortality, again affecting the same species of the Cape cormorant, an endangered species, again, unfortunately, where more than 24,000 individuals were found dead. Yeah, very, very sad. And then, of course, an oil spill happened in the Eastern Cape in November, just to keep us on our toes. And that was caused by the ship-to-ship bunkering operations in Algoa Bay. So plenty going on, but so we have to still be prepared for oil spills. But what it's taught us is that we respond to these incidents in the same way as we respond to oil spills. You know, you still need to be prepared, you need capacity and you need equipment, and the way that you respond to them would be linked to your contingency plans. So if nothing else, it's been good practice.
Yeah, it's amazing work, and as you say, it's not so much about the specific type of emergency, but the fact that there's a variety of these challenges that occur, and it's a similar skill set that SANCCOB holds that you know, that allows that effective response. And I know a number of the other GOWRS partners I've spoken to, you know, deal with similar challenges where, you know, there's more and more perhaps of these non-oil events that you're also being sort of called upon to assist with.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the connection in terms of the global network and the role that SANCCOB plays in and amongst that sort of international network of organizations is your involvement in the GOWRS project over the years. And as you know, we're in the process of making that transition from GOWRS being funded as a project to actually being a live service. And so two questions that are connected to that. One is, if you think about just the benefit it will have for wildlife response preparedness in general, like what would you say is sort of some of the significant benefits or outcomes of GOWRS really becoming an actual service this year?
I think it's undoubtedly the collaboration between these 10 partner organizations. There's so much strength and knowledge and skill between the 10 organizations for different reasons. That is so amazing that it's now coming into fruition. And there's been a lot of work, as you know, Paul, over the years, before my time even, or before I was involved in GOWRS. So understanding that even though each organization is individual, it's unique in their own way, we all have the same goal, and we all have the same mindset of making the world a better place in terms of being more prepared so that wildlife do not have to suffer and that they have a good opportunity of successful rehabilitation. So that's what we have in common, and that collaboration is extremely powerful. And I think in the future, you know, when we are out there in the field, we'll be able to show the members the value of that collaboration, what each person brings to the table and what we can deliver in the field.
It's a really good point, and just the variety of organizations and skill sets and the ability to actually mix and match and tailor the team for the specific needs of a particular location or species impact, etc. So that's obviously in relation to preparedness in general. I think that's a really good point. For SANCCOB as an organization, I mean, you already talked about all the different sort of ways that you're asked to respond, and some of those are funded, some of them are not. What would this mean for SANCCOB as an organization? What would it mean with the service being live, and how would that change, hopefully, SANCCOB for the better?
You know, as an NGO, we are constantly challenged with funding. We're constantly challenged with, you know, lack of resources and capacity. You know, there's always sort of 10 hats that each of us has to wear. So I do think that the funded service will bring an opportunity for us to grow our levels of response. It would be amazing for us to grow our team so that we can deliver much more training, especially to African partners. You know, we're sitting at the bottom of Southern Africa, and there's a huge expectation. We are mandated by the South African government to respond to oil spills, but we have responded to Namibia, and we've responded in the Southern Ocean to Tristan, Jacuna as well. So when you look at the world, you know, there's really just these pockets of expertise that are sitting, and which is now the formation of GOWRS. And so for SANCCOB, I would love to see some opportunities for us to grow that level of preparedness for Africa specifically, and make sure that we are the go-to organization for preparedness, for skill and expertise when it comes to, members needing that service.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, and hopefully one that really supports SANCCOB in terms of having that sort of connectivity and sort of being able to be recognized and also have the ability to provide that service and expertise. I guess the other part of that is actually sort of moving that preparedness piece forward, not just for Africa, but sort of the world in general. I mean, I suppose just another question on that would be, what do you see as those sort of next priorities in terms of improving preparedness in general? If we look at different countries around the world and sort of where we are with, wildlife response preparedness, sort of things you think about, which would really be the sort of next priorities for our members or other stakeholders to think about.
I mean, we are aware that shipping and vessel traffic has increased over the years. We know that oil and gas exploration has increased and will continue to increase. So the risks are there, and we are all aware of that. And obviously preparedness is a key. But I think it would be very helpful to do an audit, a global audit, to look at preparedness per country, and to identify those areas that really need tier 1 at least, and assist those countries or those regions with developing a baseline of preparedness. Some countries are hugely advanced in where they are today, and that's amazing. But there's many parts of the world that have nothing. So if an oil spill happens, sometimes it doesn't even get reported. And you can imagine that the wildlife component and the environmental aspects are last on the list. So those are the elements that worry me. And in Africa, specifically West Africa, there's huge opportunity for us to really make a difference. Yeah.
And I think what you're saying as well is, I think one of the other reasons really behind GOWRS, which is that you do have these countries where expertise has developed over the years, and this idea of pooling that experience and those organizations together, not just to respond to incidents in other parts of the world, but hopefully to also be a force multiplier for making those further developments in terms of what needs to be considered ahead of time. So is there anything else that you'd like to share just about SANCCOB and your work before we wrap up with one last question?
I mean, as you said earlier, I've been at SANCCOB for 12 years, and in that time, it's a matter of adapting to what happens over time and what happens in the space of the marine environment. Species that are endangered is a huge concern, obviously, whether it's penguins or turtles, and there's an added pressure. So when oil impacts any species, you have a small window of opportunity to rescue and bring it into a rehabilitation center, and then it's got a fairly good chance of survival and release. What's important to note with the African penguin is that independent research has shown that from the treasure, for example, oiling has actually impacted the reproductive system. So there's a huge misconception that animals can be oiled, cleaned and released, and sometimes that is possible. We obviously want to prevent that because it does have long-lasting effects. And we're currently looking at some more research now of some recent oiling incidents where we're looking at survival and breeding success of African penguins, because ultimately, if they're not breeding, they're not contributing to the population, and that's never a good thing for an endangered species. So yes, preparedness for us is key. Trying to prevent it from happening would be number one, and really sort of working with industry and working with government to help as much as we can and advise on these issues.
Well, thank you. That's a really good point, and certainly just a huge thanks for all the work that you do and that SANCCOB does, and certainly look forward to continuing that collaboration with SANCCOB as part of the GOWRS project and also locally in South Africa. So thank you for that, Nicky. And looking ahead to the next episode of this, we're going to be speaking with Tri-State Bird Rescue and Research from the east coast of the US, from Delaware. So yeah, just wanted to finish off here, if you'd like to just sort of introduce them, say something about Tri-State that you know and admire as another of the GOWRS partners.
Absolutely. Lisa Smith is the Executive Director of Tri-State. She's on the GOWRS network, and what a fantastic person she is. She has an extremely positive outlook and a can-do attitude, and she really is a pleasure to work with. I can just imagine her, in a school situation or in a high stress situation, cracking jokes and making light of it. So, and that's what it requires. We don't want these hotheads in these situations. We need people to keep calm and see the funny side of things. So Lisa, as a person and as a leader of Tri-State, is pretty amazing. And Tri-State as an organization is similar to SANCCOB. It's been around for more than 40 years, so it's well established. And what's amazing about them is that they admit more than 3,000 species or animals a year, which is huge. It's incredibly energy demanding and labor intensive work looking after birds, believe it or not. Well, you would know, Paul, having responded to the treasure as well. But yes, I mean, huge undertaking to be accepting birds all year round, whether it's a disease response or injury or whatever, it could be anything. And then on top of that, they also offer an all wildlife service as well. So it's pretty amazing what they can achieve. And that's to be admired, absolutely.
Thank you. Very well said. Great introduction. And as you say, it's great to have Lisa in that sort of wider network representing Tri-State. And yeah, really look forward to catching up with her on the next interview. But for now, thank you for chatting with me today, and wishing you all the best, hopefully for some quiet months ahead, and look forward to continuing to work on the transition of GOWRS into a service. Thanks so much, Nicky.
Thank you, Paul.